Hey everybody, it's Allison Haikila. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have a new video for Imagine. You'll see here that I have a few of the products that I use on my card, and we're making a masculine card, but I prefer to call it non-gendered. This card will be great for pretty much anybody, just by changing up the colors. So I've got a few fireworks spray here. I've got London Fog, Desert Sand, and Rich Cocoa, and I've got the abstract rubber stamp from My Favorite Things. This is no longer available, but you can use any background stamp that you like. I've also got my white embossing powder from Imagine. I'm working on some watercolor paper here, and I put that into my MISTI. I took out the little mouse pad so that the rubber stamp will fit, and now I'm going to use just regular VersaMark to stamp that image onto my watercolor paper. I'm using watercolor paper today because we're going to be spraying the heck out of it with a fireworks spray. It's going to be super saturated, so you want to make sure that you have paper that's going to hold up to all of that liquid. So I'm just applying 2 coats of the VersaMark just to make sure that I get a really good impression of that really cool abstract stamp onto my paper. And now I'm going to sprinkle on that white embossing powder all over that stamped design. Again, you can use any background stamp that you want for this. It depends on if you know who you're giving it to or not. I don't have a whole lot of background stamps, and all of the ones that I looked up online were no longer available. So I went with one of my favorites. I happen to really like this one, and again, it works for anyone. You can change up the colors to make it, more compatible to whomever you're giving it to, but I think it's just a fun design. So now I am using my heat tool to emboss that design to get it nice and set. You'll see that, well, it's hard to see in the video because it's white on white, but if you're doing it in person, you'll be able to see that it goes from a powdery matte finish to something nice and shiny. Now I just have a really big box that I've opened up. I think it had lasagna or manigot or something in it, and I'm going to just spray that panel really, really well with all 3 of my fireworks sprays. As a side note, I like to have them laying down before I start working with them. The mica colorant, or it's not really a colorant, the mica that's in there, the powder, which gives you the shimmer that's in there, will kind of spread out along the bottom, makes it a little easier to shake it up. There are agitator balls inside, and then you can just shake it up and make sure that that powder is really, throughout the entire colored liquid that's in there. I sprayed it with a little bit of water too, just to kind of get those colors to move, and I went back and forth and adding more, and even after I had dried the panel, I added just a little bit more of that rich cocoa just to get some nice fat splatters. So now the panel is completely dry, and I'm trimming off the edge. You can see that I had it slightly bigger than what the stamped area is. I did that on purpose because I wanted to be able to just trim off that excess and kind of decide where I wanted my panel to be. If I would have made the panel 4 by 5 1/4 to start, I wouldn't have had kind of an area to play with, right? So here, because I did a full 6 by 6 piece of cardstock, I was able to decide exactly where I wanted my piece to be cut. So now I have the Clean Line XL stamp set from Simon, and I decided to go with the boom as my focal part of the sentiment, and then Proud of You for my sub-sentiment. So I have some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, and I'm going to be stamping the boom with the Fallen Leaves VersaFine Clair ink. VersaFine Clair ink is my favorite ink to use for sentiments. I do it for other things too, but it's just so crisp and beautiful. The colors are outstanding. So now I have that all set up, and I have a small strip of the same Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, and I'm stamping that Proud of You with the Fallen Leaves ink again so that they coordinate perfectly. I do not have the coordinating dies for this stamp set. They are available for purchase, but I don't have them. So instead, I am fussy cutting them, and I'm just doing this really quickly. I am right-handed, so I've got my scissors in my right hand, and I'm using my left hand to hold the cardstock and actually move the word around. You can see that the scissors are not really going anywhere. It's my left hand that's moving everything around. Makes it a little bit easier that way. So now I'm going to just cut a little tail into that sub-sentiment. Just a little triangle, removing that, giving it like a flag end, and I'm going to be attaching it to the bottom there. I decided that the boom needed a little bit more colorant to it. So I had some residual ink, some brown ink on my blending brush there. Wasn't quite doing enough for me, so I grabbed some Desert Sand Memento ink and added a little bit more, and that did the trick. I did not add any of the ink to the sub-sentiment. I just left it as it is. I thought it was fine. But the boom I thought needed a little bit more oomph. So I'm just blending a little bit, and in the finished card you'll be able to see a little bit better that those edges are nice and dark now. Not super dark, just a little bit. Enhanced. I'm using my On Point glue. You can use whatever glue you prefer for this, but I wanted you to see that the On Point glue does work really well for attaching your sentiments, especially because we've got that embossing powder on there. Sometimes it's a little tricky to glue on top of that. These lines are pretty thin, but if you have thicker lines, it can be a little tricky, and On Point works really well for that. I'm attaching my sub-sentiment now. I've got my block there just holding them in place, giving them some weight so that they stick. And now I'm going to go in with some sheer shimmer Stix in Sparkle. I don't use this often enough, but this is a super, super fast way to add a little bit of sparkle to the edge of your card bases or your panels or whatever you want. It's super quick. You shake them up, apply it, and then it'll dry down really beautifully and have a fantastic shine. So that's that, and now I'm going to just trim off that excess, and now I'm going to glue the rest of my panel down. I switched over to Barely Arts glue just because I have more of that in my stash, so I just threw that on there. But you could use the On Point again if you want, if you use a dry glue, whatever you prefer. But I needed a little bit more something. Now granted, that whole panel is super shimmery thanks to those gorgeous fireworks sprays, but I added a couple of Starburst Rhinestones. I'm taping down the inside of the panel just to keep it nice and flat while I'm doing this, but I added a few Starburst Rhinestones to that outside of that card just to give it a little bit of something extra. And for this, I totally recommend using the On Point glue. The fact that it's clear from the get-go is great, and it dries beautifully, and it really holds sequins and rhinestones in place perfectly. I'm using a jewel picker and a pokey tool to get the rhinestones exactly where I want, and then I tap down the On Point glue just to get the excess glue out of the nozzle. Seriously, guys, look at that shine. You can see the sparkle around the edge from the sheer shimmer Stix. And I'm super happy with this card. I think it'll make anybody's day a little bit brighter and a little shinier. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Be well, stay safe, peace out.